What's up, everybody? You're listening to Hey Man, the advice podcast for men. I'm Sam Graham Felsen.
I'm Avi Klein.
I'm a novelist, Avi's a therapist, and we're here to answer your questions each week and hopefully get a few of our own questions answered as well. Our guest this week is Nick Novak. I was very excited to have Nick on this week. As some of you know, I'm mildly obsessed with CrossFit, and Nick has been a trained CrossFit teacher. He now specializes in Olympic lifts, which he will describe to you in this podcast. They are complicated, almost yoga-like weightlifting moves. And we talked to him about why strength training for him is more than just about getting big muscles, but is a way of life and a tool for building resilience, and how he built a philosophy of life around fitness. Enjoy. One of my close friends had been nagging me for years to do CrossFit, and of course, I was hesitant for the stereotypical reasons.
Yes.
Which is why everyone
what are the stereotypical
that you'll get hurt.
Yeah, okay,
Just
right.
number one, that you'll get hurt. Number two, I think, is that everyone there would be like super ripped, and I would feel like incredibly self-conscious. Not to cast aspersions on the people at my gym, but
Not the case.
that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, it's interesting. There's like, I would say equally 50-50 split women, 50-50 like older people and younger people. Like it's just all different types. And, you know, there are like there's like one guy who looks like the Mountain from Game of Thrones, but most people look like normal people.
Right.
And anyway, I've been surprised at how opposite the culture of CrossFit is from what I was expecting. And I'm sure it varies from gym to gym, but
Yes.
at least at my quote unquote box, that's what we call CrossFit gyms in the inside. At my box, it's just like a totally non-competitive, just friendly and supportive and kind of happy vibe. It's not like this Spartan, grueling military thing that like people are afraid of. So,
Do you agree with those stereotypes of CrossFit, or are there other ones?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with the stereotypes of CrossFit. And I think it's really interesting that you said that at your box, like the community that you've found is not matching those stereotypes. Whereas I think there are other people who will get into CrossFit for those reasons. They want to be around these like, Adonis, figures. And you can absolutely find communities like that as well. It's like every gym is very different. And I tell people, if you're going to try it out, like just try and find something that like vibes with you, that you feel like you get along with, even if it's not the closest one to you. Like, yes, that's where everyone goes first, but like experiment a little bit, because once you find the group, that you feel like you're a part of, then it works a lot better. The whole process works better.
Can we back up a little bit, and can you tell us a little bit? Because I was going to ask, how did you get into CrossFit? But maybe even like before that, like tell us a little bit.
So I don't teach CrossFit classes in my day-to-day. I actually teach Olympic weightlifting mostly, which is just one component of CrossFit. And that's one of the higher skill components, like the gymnastics stuff and the weightlifting stuff are considered the most technical. So I work with CrossFitters a lot, but a lot of times I'm trying to break the habits that they get from CrossFit of rushing too much, not thinking about what they're doing, not being like present, here's what you're doing right now, and just kind of going through the motions of things and that sort of stuff. But the way I got into it was when I was teaching myself out of a book how to learn Olympic weightlifting, which is a terrible way to learn how to do it, by the way.
Yeah.
But
which book was it? Was it the Rippletoe book?
It was not the Rippletoe book.
Okay.
No, it was an excellent book by Greg Everett, Olympic weightlifting for athletes and coaches. He's a really engaging and fun writer, and he did, a good job. I managed to, teach myself pretty well, having no direct feedback. But I was teaching myself that out of a book, working out at like a New York sports club. And
how old are you at this point?
Like early 20s, like probably, I was not super, I've always been active, but I would not consider myself to be the most athletic person. But I think also, my father was on a U.S. Olympic team. Like, so I'm comparing myself to high level athletes. But anyway, so yeah, I was in my early 20s at this time. I'd finished college, just started living in New York, and another trainer who was there saw me and started talking to me, which is unheard of at at a box gym like an Equinox or New York Sports Club, you don't make eye contact, you don't talk to each other. And he came up and started chatting with me about the lifts, and he was a coach at a CrossFit gym, which is probably why he felt comfortable like walking up and approaching someone, because that's how people are, in the CrossFit community. They're very outgoing and welcoming to new people. And it's really cool, refreshing. And so he said, hey, I'm teaching a class on Saturdays. Would you like to come out and help me and get some practice coaching other people that will help you, right? A teacher, you teach someone else and you actually become a better student. So I said, yeah, absolutely. And went and did that with him for a few weeks and was shocked the first time I walked into the gym and someone walked right up to me and introduced themselves. And I was, kind of taken aback, but I really fell in love with it. And within a year, I told my partner, like, I want to quit my job and be a weightlifting coach full time.
What was your job?
So I was working as a consultant for the DNC, working on like Democratic primaries in New York City and the surrounding counties, which was fun, but it didn't let me make a direct impact, like a tangible impact on people's lives. Like I knew I was helping the people I'm getting elected and theoretically the people who are voting for them. Not to go too much down that, but it just wasn't giving me the tangible delivery that I really wanted. So I was looking for something else, but that in my opinion was similar. And that it turns out is teaching weightlifting.
You studied philosophy in college.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a part of you that was worried that, like, as someone who's like probably sees yourself as a pretty intellectually serious person, that people would think you were a meathead or something if you went into fitness professionally? Or were you worried that you might be a meathead yourself if you did that?
Well, if I wasn't worried myself about being a meathead, like, yeah, that sounds cool. I'll be a meathead. But I absolutely was concerned, like even to this day, when you go to like a college reunion or something like that, and people are like, what are you up to? And, I always tell myself, like, I'm going to say, like, I'm a teacher, because I really do consider myself a teacher. But I always, when they ask me, I just kind of look at the ground, like, I work in a gym, and really like undersell what I do, even though I feel that it's very important and impactful. So yeah, I absolutely feel this, like, that it feels weird, to be so physical when I consider myself an intellectual. But that's the beauty of the Olympic lifts, is that I get to really talk about emotional performance and like really technical things. We're talking about balance and timing and coordination. And it's not the same as like 3, 2, 1, go, start the workout and just kind of let things happen. So
for people who don't know about Olympic lifts, this is probably the most intimidating part of CrossFit for most newbies. The snatch in particular is this really complicated thing. You should just look it up on YouTube. It actually looks sort of simple, maybe, but it's hard when you're starting out to do it right.
Sure.
And it's funny because I used to loathe snatch days and just kind of want to skip on those days. And now those are the days that I'm most excited for, because it does feel like feels like maybe I don't do yoga. We've actually talked about why we don't do yoga on this show before, but feels kind of closer to something like yoga, where you're really thinking through all of these different muscles in your body and how they're interacting and achieving a kind of balance. Do you see it kind of like yoga? Or
absolutely. What I liken it to more often than yoga, I do see that parallel. What I liken it to more often is golf. That seems to really resonate with people, like the golf swing, kind of infinitely refinable, almost zen, or a dance and ballet. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a lot about coordination and timing and rhythm. And so when I get someone who comes into my class and they tell me they were a dancer before, I'm like, oh, great, this is going to be fun and easy.
By the way, there's a great video of Nick training Odell Beckham's cousin in snatching. If you want to check that out, he's pretty good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
and just to clarify, so there are 2 lifts that we're talking about here, 2 Olympic lifts. One is called the snatch. The other is called the clean and jerk. It's a 2-part clean and jerk. The objective of both of them is to get something from the floor to over your head in one, like, very fast, sharp movement. If it's like hitching or pressing or something, then it would not be considered a good lift. So it's very explosive. It is independently contested in the Olympics as its own sport, and then it's used a lot by track and field, volleyball, football, those kinds of strength and conditioning programs to develop strength and speed.
The benefit is this combination of strength and speed.
Yes, exactly. Versus like a deadlift or a bench press, which is very, strong, but much slower.
So my struggle with CrossFit, which I have some experience with and I really just have time to go for runs right now, but like, found myself more comfortable with powerlifting, because I think I have a sort of lazy disposition when it comes to this stuff. Like I just kind of want to settle into something. Even when I run, I mean, sometimes I'll push myself, but like I can't access like explosivity that easily is one. And two, like I'm not that coordinated. And that was really like the quickness of the movement was very hard for me. I just didn't think it was too frustrating to like master.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your thoughts about that.
I would challenge you that you're not that coordinated. If you can teach yourself to walk, you can learn how to snatch. Like that is a much more
I just watched
motion.
my daughter teach herself how to walk. It is pretty amazing.
It's amazing,
how people do
right?
that.
Yeah. So snatching at the end of the day, like there's definitely a learning curve, but I truly believe that anyone can do it. That is part of my philosophy. I do agree with you that like settling into like a nice rhythm. There are certain people that I've met that is their personality type. That's what they want to do in the gym. I think that's fantastic. And they're like, good, then do what feels right to you. Like if that's what you like, go
like
for it.
Like a squat, what's the difference? I'm just trying to like, I don't think I can articulate exactly like squatting. Actually, that was always my favorite because I think my legs are stronger and so it was less hard. And like you have to be explosive. Like not just like lazing around. Like you go down, you got to go back up. But that felt so different. Maybe it's just it's just harder for me.
Like I think it's pacing. I think it comes down to pacing. Like if I was saying like you do 50 squats and you have 3 minutes, whatever, something like that, then it's right. But if I tell you like, here are your sets, your reps, your weight, trying to get this done in the next 20 minutes, like you can take your time with it. And that's what's different about my classes from a normal CrossFit class is we are slowing way down and looking at what you're doing and not just kind of trying to get the work done as quickly as possible, which has a value, but
yeah, it's a similar vibe at my gym. They're really like I have a friend who goes to a box in South Carolina, and I see what his WODs. That's a workout of the day. That's more CrossFit terminology. I'll try to steer clear of that stuff. But his stuff, like the stuff they do, is like I don't know, often like 5 times more than what we're doing on an average day. But I actually like the fact that they're so focused on getting the movement right rather than, being a hero and, loading a ton on or doing. And I will say, just getting back to what you said about if you can learn how to walk, you can do this other stuff. I always consider myself a poorly coordinated person. And, never thought I could run fast. Like I always thought of myself as slow. I always thought of myself as uncoordinated. And I always thought of like certain muscles that I had would always be weak, like my shoulders or whatever. And I think what's been really cool about CrossFit for me and what's made it more than just some meathead thing, but actually like an important, a really important piece of my life now is that I have actually learned how to snatch. I have learned how to do an overhead squat, which I never thought I could do. That's when you have to basically push your arms up into the sky with the bar and then squat, which is tough.
Horrible.
Yes.
And I thought I would never be able to do it. And I even learned recently how to do a muscle up. I was like,
oh, nice.
I wrote an essay about this for the New York Times a couple of years ago that I used to not be able to do a single pull-up, and I was like terrified of pull-ups because I thought I could never, ever do one. And now I can do a muscle up, which is basically a pull-up, a super pull-up where you end up pushing yourself above the bar. So anyway, all of that stuff is not to humble brag, but to just say that maybe it's a little bit to humble brag, but it's to say that what's so cool is that CrossFit can surprise you. It can like show you that like, you're actually capable of doing a lot more physically than you thought you were. And like, maybe you're not as awkward as you thought you were. Maybe you're not as uncoordinated as you thought. maybe you're not even as slow as you thought you were.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden I can run fast. I would always last in races my whole life. And now I can run fast. It's exciting.
You're reminding me. So I have three daughters, and you're reminding me about how much some of this is like just a lot of the way I think about myself as like a quote unquote athlete is rooted in my growing up and being an unathletic kid. And I was at the pool with my oldest daughter, and I remember like my lack of upper body strength, being able to pull myself out of like onto the dock or whatever, like in the lake, like my total inability to do that. And my wife and I were joking about how we'd have to like roll up onto the thing. And then I watched my daughter struggle with the same thing. Then the younger one is like, she could do it like easily. She just like naturally has that upper body strength. But like the humiliation that you just feel at your own inability to do something, and what a deterrent that is from ever wanting to try it again instead of mastering it.
Yeah.
Like that has stayed with me my whole life, you know?
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. You're in the therapist's chair, so I get to.
But that's like what I love about the work that I do every day is that I can show someone like you do not have to be defined by these, ideas that you create for yourself, even as an adult. The oldest person that I've trained was 75 years old. He's 74. He turned 75 while I was training with him. He had boxed, and that's it. He had never lifted a weight. He had certainly not been like jumping around or doing Olympic lifts. And he would say this, he's like, I'm so uncoordinated. I feel like a tiny person inside my head trying to drive my own body. That was his image, which I loved.
Yeah.
And to get him to be able to do things, even at that point in his life, he had plenty of history to draw from to say, I can't, but to get him to do it and then to just be able to experience that change that a person that comes over for us, like, I am addicted to. I mean, you're a therapist. You must have similar sensations.
Well, when you get to see something that's innate, like that innate human drive to, I don't know, I think of it as resilience. I'm sure there's other words, but like to go beyond what you thought you had. You know, that's why people come into therapy in the first place, is because as much pain they're in, there's also something else there.
Yeah.
Speaking of resilience, another aspect of CrossFit beyond these complicated Olympic lifts that does intimidate people who know a little bit about it is the Metcon, or the metabolic conditioning, which usually happens in the second half.
I think
of
you
class.
low-key love the lingo.
I do. I have to. And well, actually, on that note, I mean, part of what is fun about CrossFit is that, cult is too strong of a word, but it has a community element to it. Part of a community is having shared language, like having shared inside jokes, having shared, catchphrases or whatever. That's part of what makes, and that was the exact stuff that I used to roll my eyes at when my friends who did CrossFit would use those terms, and now I'm like using them without irony. But the metabolic conditioning part is really just like if you've ever seen on a TV comedy, like somebody doing CrossFit, usually they'll show something like the metabolic conditioning, which is like, doing, 75 burpees and, 50 wall balls, in 5 minutes, or something much more brutal than that. And they're designed to kind of like totally deplete you and exhaust you. And by the end, if you've done your job, usually you're writhing around on the floor by the end. And I used to detest that stuff. And it's weird. Like I now look forward to it as like a test of resilience. Like I'm like, if I can get through this one, even though I know it's going to suck, I know it's going to hurt, I know it's going to suck going in, but if I can get through this one, like it I don't know, like I've just like notched another notch in my resilience, tree or whatever, and I don't know, I wonder like how much do you think that idea of like deliberate suffering, deliberately doing painful stuff plays into what CrossFit's all about, or what you care about as a teacher?
Yeah, I think that is almost that's the secret. Like that's where the magic happens, right? Whether it's learning a new skill, lifting a heavier weight, or pushing beyond the point where you start to say, no more, I can't do any more. And what you get to find every time is that you can do more, right? These like limits are fake or they're easily broken. And then, what my hope always is as a teacher is that the person takes that into their daily lives with them. So I had a woman tell me once that we'd been training together for about a year, and she came in one day and she was like almost in tears, but happy. And she said, I asked for a raise yesterday for the first time in my career, for the first time in my life. And she said, and it's because of our work together. Like every chance that you get to do something you didn't think you can do starts building up your confidence and your ability to say, like, maybe I can. Yes, I can. And then they just start cascading and you're doing things that you never thought you could. It's like, it's practice. The gym is practice for, being that person in life. And if more important, or I don't know, but in other ways, yeah.
I wanted to, you mentioned earlier just in passing that your dad was an Olympic athlete. And I'm like, whoa, can we back up for a second? What team was he on?
He was a Greco-Roman wrestler. So that's wrestling that there are no legs involved. You're never like in the down position. You can't grab legs. You can't touch legs. So it's all upper body. It's all grabbing and throwing. And it's the same, as the name suggests, is the same type of wrestling that the Greeks and the Romans did. So super old school, really fun. The most points are if you can grab your opponent and make kind of a rainbow out of their legs. Like you grab them and throw them up in the air. That's what you get the most points for.
So what was that? Was it cool or was it intimidating to have a dad who was not only an Olympian but like a tough guy Olympian who could toss people through the air,
and a United States Marine at the same time? So like not just like an athlete but like a military athlete at the same time. So like, yes, I think it was a little bit, I don't want to say intimidating is the word, but especially not when I'm sitting across from a therapist, right? But
he was pretty, it sounds like on paper at least, he was like the man. He was like military, Greco-Roman wrestler, Olympian.
Yes. And but that was, it was good because then you could see, it's not enough to like hear about focus and discipline and applying yourself and all these things, but to really see it and to see how someone wraps their entire life in these things was, I think, like a gift that I got as a child. So I wasn't really into wrestling very much. Of course, like I learned as much as I could and I participated in it for a long time, but at the end of the day, I never really feel very competitive against other people. I had almost no desire to like beat my opponent. I always was much more drawn to things where I was competing with myself. And so when I found weightlifting, like, oh my God, this is perfect because it's just me and this inanimate object. So that just vibed much better for me. Yeah.
I'm the same way in terms of having difficulty with competitiveness with other people and preferring to compete against myself. But just out of curiosity, why do you think that is for you, that you like weren't into competing against other people?
That's a good question. I don't know. I never really got like the satisfaction out of it. Like it didn't, I mean, I'm sensitive. I'm a sensitive person. And like, if I beat someone else, I remember being a kid and like beating other people and then they're like crying and like, I don't, like I don't want to make this guy cry. It's not worth it. It's not fun. It's just not where like it came from. And it might have also had to do with like, again, like military is, being in a military family, like living on military bases is a lot about the greater good, like you're following the rules, not because they're the rules, but because that's how you take care of the other people around you. And even little things like crossing the street. I rode my bike here, so I'm like very into like crossing the street type of mentality. Like you wouldn't jaywalk on a military base, one, because you'd probably get in a lot of trouble. They're pretty strict, but like if you jaywalk, this messes up this car, the flow of traffic slows down, you create risk, like all this kind of stuff that's always about you, the individual, doing your part. And I think that was impressed on me pretty strongly. And that's why I'm much more interested in challenging myself in ways that I can compete with myself to be, a quote unquote better, person than engaging with someone else. It's not enough to beat someone else. You have to beat yourself if you want to really, truly improve. I don't know. Maybe it's a stretch, but
No, that makes sense to me. Did you go into the military or you?
no. My parents told me like very clearly, do not go into the
Oh,
military.
really?
They said you don't have the mind for it. You
Oh.
don't take orders very well. That doesn't work. So
I
they
mean-
were clear about that.
I've just sort of a broad question. We've only just met, half an hour ago, whatever. But you seem like a pretty chill or just grounded, centered guy. I'm wondering, were you always, would you consider yourself to be centered and grounded, or not? But if you do consider yourself to be, were you always like this, or were you like more kind of anxious or frazzled when you were younger? I'm just curious.
So imagine this, right? You're going to your first day of first grade, right? You're very starting school. You have young children, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. You're nervous because you don't know the teachers, like you don't know the people in your class, you don't know anything like that. And on top of it, you've actually never even been in the town that you're going to school in before. So you have you definitely aren't going to have any friends when you go in there, and you might not even know like the cultural references that people have because you didn't grow up in that town. And then repeat that again in second grade and third grade and fourth, and all the way through high school. So your options are learn how to interact with a wide variety of people, or not, right? Or just like be a loner. And through different stages, between the beginning of school and the end of high school, I went through I tried on both of those options. But you just learn out of necessity. Like, people are not that different at the end of the day,
What'd you learn?
Like, people are all kind of the same in that, like, I don't think anyone's like really actively seeks conflict, and like even those that do, like the bullies in school and stuff like that, like they're just like scared of something, like everybody else. And so if you just try to like always put yourself in someone else's shoes, why are they acting like that? Everyone is the way they are for a reason, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I learned. And then if I could try to understand the reason, not even figure it out, just try. People like that. They love that. And then it's very easy to interact with other people. So I learned a lot of socials, I have very good social skills. I'm not the most social person, but I have the skills. So that's nice.
Did you get bullied ever?
Oh my, yeah. All the time.
And so did you actually, one, I'm curious, did you get into physical fights, or did you walk away? You did?
Yes.
Okay. How did those go for you?
Not well. Yeah. Because there's no good solution. Like, either you get kind of beat up, or you like kind of beat someone up, and again, like feel really bad about it. Like, that's not my thing. Like, I don't, I don't like that. So
I'm curious, given that you are a CrossFit coach, an Olympic lift coach, for people who are listening, which is everybody, because we don't have a video version of this yet. Nick has a very thick mustache, kind of like a Russian Cossack kind of mustache and goatee. So you check all the boxes for masculinity.
Thank you.
And and I'm curious, do you does checking all of those boxes ever make you feel like more comfortable expressing an interest in stuff that's not hypermasculine? Like,
it has to.
Yeah.
Right?
So like, are there examples of stuff where you feel like, yeah, I'm cool admitting that I like such and such, even though like it's considered soft or whatever?
So my hobby outside of the gym is bird watching. I love bird watching. I hope my landlord's not listening to this, but like, I have a bird feeder attached to my window, and I get all these birds. Like, I just love it. I'll sit there and like watch them. I have some finches right now, some blue jays. I got a cardinal who's like edging around but hasn't come up to the feeder yet. And like, to be in New York City and have this life around me is like such a joy. And I love taking pictures of like flowers and plants. Like, I love nature. And if you're on my Instagram, like, I have, my account is for business, so it's like weightlifting stuff, but the stories are for myself. And so it's like my dog, my birds, and flowers most of the time. And it's like, I feel like if I didn't have the other side of the coin to my life, I might not be as confident in saying like, oh, I love this. I really love this stuff, not just like it. But that's my opinion, is like, that is actually what being a man, or like a good man, is about at the end of the day. Like, there is a value to being, strong and resilient and willful, but there's also a value to being nurturing and caring and loving. I feel happiest when I'm taking care of something else, whether that's walking my dog or teaching someone to be strong.
Do you express those values to your students, or is that like
more than they would like me to?
So they're resistant to it sometimes.
They're not resistant to it, but they're like, everyone's different.
How do you
people.
if I were your student, what would you like? What are the kind of things you say?
One of my favorite things to say to someone, we're talking about rhythm, right? I need you to be slow, and then I need you to be fast. And I'm like a jellyfish. Think of the way a jellyfish swims: slow, fast, slow, fast. And some people are like, oh, I love that. And then other people, like especially like more macho guys, are kind of like, okay, like slow, fast. I get it. And like, I don't need the
not a fucking
nature.
jellyfish.
Yeah, I'm not a jellyfish. Like, right? You wish you were a jellyfish. They're beautiful. But for the most part, if people don't really like that approach, they just don't work with me, and so then it's very easy for me to kind of, be myself.
Yeah.
So
when we were corresponding about setting this up, and you're like, I like to make eye contact when I'm giving someone advice, and I really liked that.
Yeah.
And we're gonna do it a little bit differently this time, because actually we could use some advice.
Or more precisely, I could. So usually we have a listener submitted question. This week, I'm going to ask the question.
Wow.
Recently I got some criticism for talking too much on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And in general in my life, I've gotten criticism for talking too much. I'm also a creative writing teacher, and sometimes I'll get feedback on those, student feedback forms, being like, "This guy talks too much. Mm-hmm. He should STF you more." And I'm like, "Well,
someone really write that?
Isn't a teacher supposed to talk?
Right? Isn't that your job?"
But anyway, I recognize that I talk too much, and without going into the psychological canyons of why I talk too much, I think it probably has something to do with just anxiety, a discomfort with silence, and just a feeling that maybe what I'm saying isn't smart enough, so I can make it smart by continuing to talk. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but I do talk too much. So I want to talk less and listen more. So I guess I'm looking for advice on, you don't seem like you have this problem, but if you, let's say
talking too much.
Do you?
Okay. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think we should work a little bit more on defining the problem better. Like, you're right. I mean, yes, you want the solution to be, you want to talk less, but it did seem to me, and I could use some advice, I suppose. I'm curious, you and I have only texted about this. Basically what happened was, like, I think I texted Sam and I was like, "Hey, I've gotten some feedback, like people who are listening saying, you're starting to talk too much." And we had like touched into it a little bit in like a very gentle way before that. And then someone posted a review that also said you talk too much, and it was like making them not want to listen anymore. And you had like it really did feel
well,
bad.
It was the double whammy.
It
was like
specifically you talk too much? Or,
yes.
Right,
yeah.
Not that you're both talking
no,
too much.
just
that's
Sam.
me
That's
in
the
particular.
podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it was the double whammy of getting Avi's text right at the moment that I happened to have seen this comment on the Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.
Like, this dude talks way too fucking much.
So like so that felt really bad for you. So I'm curious about, I don't know, how to, like, what I'm interested in for myself is like, how can I help you with that? And I don't know if I was helpful in the way I brought it up, but then like I know you want to talk less, but it does seem like, and you're like a pretty committed meditator, but how do you work with this part of you, that the anxious part that is driving all of this talking? Seems like maybe what to hone in on. I don't know. What do you think so far? can you help us?
Gosh, I don't.
Or
I doubt it.
maybe without
Yeah.
right away jumping into advice. I mean,
You said that you
laughed.
talk too much.
Yeah, you do think you talk too much?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And do you feel bad about that or not really?
No, I don't feel bad about it. I do feel bad about it sometimes when I'm trying to engage in conversation with someone. I don't want to, like, especially in like a situation like this, like I don't want to be like monopolizing, but in my professional life, that's what people are paying me for, is to like talk to them. And yeah, it could keep things more succinct, but at the end of the day, like, you want to be entertained, you want to hear, interesting things and stuff like that. It's like, I don't feel bad about that at all. And I mean, I can't say you shouldn't either, but professionally, I kind of justify.
Have you ever had the experience though? Because I think part of the way that we do things here is it's almost like simulated friendship. I mean, we're genuinely friends, but it's like setting, it's three people talking,
right,
and developing closeness,
mm-hmm.
right, knowledge of each other, and so I feel like more analogous is like getting coffee with a friend and just like verbally dumping on them,
or having dinner,
Wow.
like a dinner party where you're
right,
the
like
one talking.
That's
the most.
really what we're talking
right,
about. Like, how do you
right.
train yourself out of that, or how do you work with that?
Well, I like to practice facilitating conversation. So I had a birthday party recently, because it was my birthday, and I invited a wide spectrum of different people, and some of them are, very outgoing, and some of them are more shy. The weirdos, right? Which is not true. They're fine. But when if you notice that like someone in a group of three, it's I think a little more difficult. But like, if you are aware enough because of your meditation to know that you talk too much, like I like to deliberately draw someone else out. Like, what do you think about that? Like, and just try to like facilitate the conversation back into that person, and then I'm only talking as like a bridge to like get them interacting,
like channeling your talkativeness
towards someone else, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we're gonna make this person be the talkative one today, and then just keeping your mouth shut, even though you want to jump in there,
right?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I struggle with, definitely on this podcast, but also let's say at a dinner party, with smart, interesting people, is we're having a conversation, someone else is talking, and I think of something that I think would be interesting. And then I have this terror that if I don't say it quickly, I'll forget it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, George Pitigorski, the meditation teacher we had on, would be like, well, what would be such a big deal if you forgot it?
Right.
In fact, I've asked him about, like, sometimes I'll have what I think is like a brilliant thought while I'm meditating.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, is it okay if I get up from the meditation and write it down? Because I don't want to forget that shit. And then he's like, it's okay. But like, what if you just, trusted that if it was such a great thing, you might remember it?
He is such a non-attached guy. When we were even emailing, I made some mistakes on that podcast, and I was like, oh man, George, I'm sorry. Can I fix it? And he's like, well, it doesn't really matter. Like, he just didn't care about anything.
right, totally. I mean, yeah, and I mean, what would be the first of all, I could probably trust myself to remember something.
Yeah.
If I didn't remember it, what would be the tragedy of letting someone else get the chance to say something interesting instead of me getting the chance?
When I was working for the DNC, we did a lot of canvassing training, and one of the things that they taught us about was check-in questions. Like, do not say more than 2 or 3 sentences to someone, really like one, without checking in. Even something as simple as like, does that make sense? Or like, do you agree that like this, and this, and then like actually waiting to hear their answer. And I find that helps me a lot when I'm interacting with other people, and like give them a chance to talk and give me a chance to give myself a break and try, listening instead of talking.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That's a good tip, actually.
Do you think, am I onto something in terms of like, you're not really listening, or like not necessarily paying attention to how it's being received?
I think to the most honest way I can put this is that I'm either like hyper listening or not really listening.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a good listener.
Yeah.
and then sometimes I'm not, and I can kind of fluctuate in and out. Like you're always a good listener. I mean, that's why they pay you the big bucks.
I do think, I mean, I like to be a good listener. I know I'm not always even. I hope my people aren't listening to this, but sometimes even in sessions with folks, and it's my own, that's what they call countertransference in part, but like that's my own stuff is coming up that makes it hard to listen.
Oh, wow.
Because I mean, I'm a person.
Right.
So like somebody
you don't
said,
really think of that. Yeah. I've never really thought of that.
Oh, yeah.
what
Yeah.
the therapists,
Right. Like what you're saying could be reminding them of things in their own life.
Yeah, I actually,
Wow.
this pretty recently, I mean, at this point, I mean, it's actually a big part of being a therapist is learning yourself in that way and learning how to work with yourself. But pretty recently, I started working with someone and they brought up things that had an uncanny resemblance to struggles I've had.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, I mean, there's similarities, but this was like, oh wow, like this is so reminding me of stuff that I went through, and it was for a moment so dysregulating to me that I was like not in the room. I was like sort of back in the past,
Right.
and then I was like, oh okay, and and kind of got back on track.
have you ever messed up in a moment like that and just started talking about your own, because I mean my experience is that therapists like never really talk about like themselves, like
I
they
think
always push it back to the patient.
What I've kind of learned is well, and there was also like part of the information that I was getting was like this, it was reminding me of things that were upsetting, but also I was kind of tuning out because the way they were presenting it was making me tune out. Like it was kind of like what we're talking about. Like there was so much. It was
Mm-hmm.
like it was like being like knocked back by their distress.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard to like. I wanted to leave the room. You know
Yeah.
what I mean, and so I did.
Yeah.
But then obviously you got to come back and help them regulate themselves so that they can connect. If that makes sense. I was kind of wondering. Because it, yes.
Although I never feel bored on this show though. I
Yeah.
definitely feel bored at dinner parties sometimes. We totally tune out.
But it really seemed this particular problem on our show really seemed to like get kicked up a notch like in August. And I was wondering if you think there was something else going on that was like sort of like a source of distress for you that you were showing up in a more
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, August was a shitty month. Yeah, for sure. I can't say more because it involves people who will probably get annoyed at me if I tattle using real names. But yes, it was a stressful month. I'm sure that was part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm actually self-conscious that we're going to be boring our guest by being too inside baseball about our own dynamic of me talking too much on the show. But
when you tend to talk a lot, like, is it because you have like a point that you want to prove, or is it just because like your insight is so great, like people need to hear this?
Sometimes both. I mean, sometimes one, sometimes the other.
Yeah.
I think no. I look, definitely. And again, I'm already feeling self-conscious that I'm like making this the me show.
No, I think
but it is the me. I guess this is the me show because
Yeah.
it's my question. Definitely, I've struggled throughout my life of wanting to be liked. I mean, that's just and to give myself some credit, I'm pretty confident that I'm a likable guy. Like, most people like me.
Yeah.
That dick who left the comment didn't. Just kidding, pal. I still want you to like me, please. No, but some people don't. But a decent number of people like me. I've always had lots of friends and never struggled socially. But definitely, I think part of why I'm likable is because I want to be liked.
Mm-hmm.
So I cultivate the qualities that are likable, you know? And I think if I was like more comfortable not really giving a shit about what other people thought about me, I might be less likable because I would just, or or maybe that's actually a dumb way of putting it.
No.
I might be less like charismatic in certain ways. Like might be quieter. I might like not feel a need to fill up a room. Like I definitely put pressure on myself to be like an entertainer, like a guy who could tell funny jokes and funny stories. And like, I definitely feel pressure. And actually like, I've talked about this in the past on the podcast, but like I used to have, I wouldn't say it was a drinking problem, but I drank to the point where I realized I needed to cool down a little bit. And anytime there was like a dinner party type thing, I would always make sure to drink like a good amount.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason why is because I always feel like, oh, those are situations where I really need to be on and really need to be performing. So like I got to really loosen up for the big show. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I you know, and I think, you know, almost every time we have an advice question, we end up reaching the conclusion that like it all boils down to like being more comfortable with yourself and just accepting yourself and letting go. And I think that's probably the case. Like I think if I was less concerned with wanting to be well liked, I would feel less need to perform, and less need to fill up the room. And I could just focus more on what other people are saying and drawing them out rather than feeling the need to like be the center of, you know, the center ring in the circus.
Well, what do you, I'm always so pleased when we have like a random question and it turns out to be a good one for our guest. And since I've learned that you're pretty good at connecting with people, do you think, I mean, okay, that's one idea is you could care less about being liked.
Easier said than done.
Very much easier said than done. Just, is that what drives your capacity to connect, or is that,
what if you used your ego to your advantage? Like it would take some self-awareness, right? But you don't, someone doesn't have to be like the most talkative person in the room to be the most intriguing. Like you want people to like you, but what if instead of playing like, you know, the like outgoing boisterous guy, you played like the mysterious stranger and only said a few things and like tried to really rope people in with as few words, like just a look and a twirl of the mustache. You know?
You do need a sweet mustache.
That helps. That helps. And the same thing if you're, I love debating. But sometimes it can get too personal and charged, and it kind of takes the fun out of it if like people's feelings are actually getting hurt. And so when I tend to talk too much, especially when I'm arguing with someone, and so I try and remind myself always of the Elenchus, of like asking questions of people and trying to get them to arrive at the conclusion that I want them to arrive at themselves without me having to do it. Right?
Say the word again.
Elenchus.
That's Socrates,
yes.
right?
Yeah, it's like you would say your idea, and then he would ask you a series of questions because he was much smarter than everyone else, and then he could get them to arrive at his conclusion or disprove their own theory, right? So if you could say like, in this situation, I want to prove my point. How can I get there without telling them? I want them to get there themselves.
Sounds these are a lot of work.
Yeah, but if you want to, work on something and change something about yourself, then
you got to put in work.
Put in the work.
Yeah, I would actually love to be the quiet, mysterious guy. It's funny. I have a friend who is very well liked. Because everyone thinks he's like the sweetest guy. I think in part because he's very soft spoken and, really only speaks when he really, really has something to say, and, often just takes a back seat and lets other people have the floor. And he's very, very well liked. And he was expressing to me and some other friends that he feels really bad about himself for being such an introvert and wishes he could be more extroverted. And I was saying to him, like, man, I want to be like you. Like, I wish I could be like, I think it's so much cooler to be an introvert. Like, I think of extroverts as so lame in some respects. Like, come on, like, you really need to share all this shit. Like, introverts are like just these like actually, I keep bringing back George Pitagorsky. He's actually very relevant to this conversation. He's my meditation teacher, so I learned a lot from him. And he always says like, wouldn't like the ultimately Zen person just basically say nothing? They would just be like so chilled that they wouldn't really even need to use words. And, I would love to be the kind of writer who could write like a novel, that's 2 pages long as opposed to, hundreds of pages long. But I'm bringing this up because I want to turn the tables on you, Avi.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
You so
Wait, part of what
I'm not
fuels
making
this-
excuses.
Yeah, but part
I'm
of
not
what-
making excuses, but definitely early on the show, you didn't talk very much,
Mhm.
and I felt like a pressure to fill, like for example, when we had a guest and there was a moment of silence,
Yeah.
like I always I would look at you and then I'd be like, I don't know if he has a question yet, but this could get awkward if I don't fill it quickly.
Mhm.
And then I would just talk. And I think I felt a pressure because you're such a good listener and such a giving person in terms of letting other people go, that I felt like extra pressure to be the talker. I'm curious, do you have talked more on the show as the show's gone on?
Yeah.
But do you, as a good listener, as a more soft-spoken guy, wish you were more of a blabber, or do you like being a more soft-spoken guy?
I don't think necessarily just like blabbing per se.
Maybe not blabber.
I do. I mean, things I admire about you are you're a very good storyteller, and you're very astute in your observations, and those are traits that I wish I had more of. I don't know. There's something, I have like a self-censoring quality to myself where I just sort of, I'm like, oh, is that really something I need to say, or do I need to say more of that? And probably the only times, like I was saying before, where more comes out are when I'm anxious, and then it's almost like I can't censor myself. It's the opposite. Too much comes out.
So sometimes you don't talk for fear of sounding
I'm critical of
stupid.
myself. Yeah. Well, I think it's stupid. I'm not sure really what I have to say. And I'm maybe like a beat slower. I'm just a little bit more laconic, I guess. And so if you paused, I think I probably would have a question, things come to me, but I'm not so, the words aren't always so on the tip of my tongue.
Nick, with your partner, if you feel comfortable talking about it, is she talkative also, or is she more of a listener?
She's super introverted.
Okay.
And which is actually something that we work on all the time, and just has opened up a little bit more. But when I first met, she would probably disagree, but I'm right. When I first met her, she was super shy. And we've been together for 13 years since we were kids. We were 18 years old, so we've been together for a long time. Is that math right? And anyway,
20,
but it's not 20 years.
Okay.
So maybe I was 19. I don't know. But what were you saying? Yeah. So she will often, we talk a lot. We talk about everything. You guys know what it's like, right? And it's ask me for advice all the time, especially about interpersonal relationships and work stuff, because I'm, kind of good at that. And that has been a great opportunity for me to practice really listening and connecting to the person, and then understanding what she is saying, and then what the person that she's talking about might be thinking or feeling in this situation as well. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. I was wondering if it ever, if being talkative ever caused problems in your relationship. It definitely causes problems in mine. But I think part of it is because my wife is a real extrovert too, and she also really likes to talk, although she is a better listener than me. And
she has a pretty high bar, if she doesn't mind me speaking about it, but she has a high bar for what it means for someone to be connected.
Yeah.
So if she feels like you're just talking to talk, she gets pissed about that.
Yes. Sometimes I get grief about that.
She's one of my oldest friends, so I know her well.
Yeah.
Well, this is sort of, I think this is a related skill. I'm curious, like you were talking about the bros who don't want to be jellyfish, right? There's a skill in learning, how do you reach different people, right? And different people need different energy. I have that with some of my different people I work with. There are some people, patients of mine, where I have to talk a lot. They don't want to talk. And I have to almost fill it in. It sounds like maybe a little bit like what you're talking about with your partner.
Yeah.
You have to almost narrate what's going on, because they're using 5 words, and really it's a 100-word description.
Yeah.
And that's hard for me to do, but I've kind of cultivated that, to be a different type of person that they need me to be.
How have you cultivated it?
I think being really clear, that's a great question, because that's what we're trying to get at. I'm really clear, first of all, like what do they need?
Uh-huh.
And I think about almost like in an energy sense, like they need a lot of description. They need the type of person who can explain it to them, right? Like they need to hear, like I'm thinking about, like the type of person I'm thinking of as a therapy client is in the room with me, we're working with very young parts of themselves. And so it's like the younger parts have less words the way like a young child, like they just can't describe it as well the way an adult would. So it's like, I think of myself as like the adult, the parent explaining everything that they maybe can't explain. And I just experience that as energetic, like a loving energy that they need, whereas someone else might need like a more receptive type of space.
So what do you do with this? Oh, so go ahead, Nick.
I also experience it as an energetic thing, and something that I'll be clear with myself about what this person needs. Like the first time you meet someone, you don't really know.
Yeah.
But once you've been working with someone for a little while, like I'll look at my calendar in the morning and say like, I'm going to meet with this person at this time. And I know they need this kind of person. And so like acknowledging like this one needs a listener, this one needs a talker.
Yeah.
This one needs a listener. That like helps me.
Yeah, me too.
Be the person that they want to. And then I'll take on people who are, a challenge to me, someone who wants to talk over me all the time and doesn't want to listen and stuff like that. And I'll say like, all right, this hour of your week is dedicated to becoming a better teacher for this kind of, or just becoming a better teacher by working with this kind of person. Like your work is work. Like it's all contributes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
What do you do with a super blabbermouth client?
With a super blabbermouth, that's a really good question because that plays into some of my other weaknesses of like it could make me more introverted and almost shy. So usually like the first time I meet them, I say something like, listen, I have to get this out of the way, but I interrupt a lot and I feel really bad about it. But I just want you to know I'm going to interrupt you all the time and you might get pissed about me. And so can we talk about that first? And then I've given myself permission to interrupt them as much as is needed. And then I can just cut them off and point out to them, your talking is getting in the way.
Does anyone ever get irritated by being interrupted?
Like there was something happening today with someone where like, I just kept asking for more. I guess it's different from being interrupted. I think once I've cleared that up, they're like pretty good with it. And maybe they might be frustrated, but not at me. They're just like, okay, I know I have to stop talking, but like, today I kept asking for more from someone because I wanted them to really pay attention. And I wanted them to use more words to describe their experience. And they couldn't give me more, and they were like, what more do you want from me? So I mean, people of course get annoyed at me in therapy, but yeah. So
all right, that brings up one more question I want to ask you, and then we should probably wrap things up. Let's say one of your blabbermouth client, all of your clients are wonderful people. I shouldn't label them as blabbermouths.
Some are chatty.
One of your chattier clients
is going particularly on. What we're talking about, right, is someone who wants to talk at the expense of really paying attention to their inner experience,
right?
At least in their hour with me, it's like they're making small talk instead of being contemplative. It's like often what it is,
right? So, I guess what I was going to ask is like, right, what is the kind of talk that you would just cut somebody off and be like, no, we're not doing that.
It's true. You could there's probably like a taxonomy of different types of over talking. And there's like the small talk, which I'm kind of like, look, we're 10 minutes into this. How do you want to use the time?
Yeah.
What about like repetitively, like just complaining about your boss or something like that? Would that be something you're like, all right, we've heard this 1,000 times. You're repeating yourself?
Because what would start to happen is like, as I would ask them to really notice, what's going on as you're talking about this. And if they can't, then one, it would tell me they weren't really taking me in. Like they're not listening to me. They're not taking themselves in either. And so I would just be pretty explicit about that.
Right.
So
they'd be like an example might be like them wanting to finish telling you the exact thing that their boss said rather than how they felt about what their boss said, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Where they were like focused on the details.
People's capacity to ignore me is incredible.
But I guess I'm asking because I think, I mean, look, I'll give myself some self-advice since theoretically we're advice givers too. I mean, I think, obviously just relaxing, letting go. I'm going to use Nick's, sort of little ego trick of getting an ego boost out of being the guy who draws people out and asks questions, and sort of the more quiet, strong silent type. I think I can get some ego rush out of that. And I need to be better at just letting go of myself and focusing on the other people in the room, and just being more engaged in what they're saying, and not worrying so much about what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But when I do talk, I think that be useful to bring mindfulness to when am I telling a story in which I'm really contributing something meaningful, hopefully on a deeper level, like an emotional level, to the conversation. Because if I'm doing that, and if the story takes 5 minutes but it's a really powerful story, I think it's fine to share it, right?
Yeah, I like your stories.
But if it's just kind of like, oh, here's like a funny little cheap laugh, that I want to get just because I want the ego boost of like you guys laughing at something that I said, but I'm really not bringing anything deeper to the table. Like, I think just being aware of like, when am I talking to just get the quick ego rush, and when am I talking because I genuinely want to share something that was meaningful to me and connect to other people.
Yeah.
I think I
think that's good advice. I was thinking a little bit more about like, how did I start to do this? And I'm looking, so on where Nick is sitting, I have like my little coffee table where I keep my drinks, and I have a feather on it. And the feather is from a meeting I had with a man I work with who's like a mentor and a supervisor to me. And I'd really struggled with certain aspects of being a therapist and questioning my own worth. And it was just like I had a really emotional session with him about my own self-doubts, and came to a good place with it. And I sort of like took this feather as like a reminder of that session. And so I always keep it next to me, just because like in my shakier moments, I can look at it and remember him and remember how good I felt afterwards. And I don't know, I'm really into like objects.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'll write like one phrase of like a thing I want to do and put it on the same coffee table, so that I can just like, that's my thing for today.
Yeah.
My thing is every session I'm going to say this phrase because it's the skill I want to hone. That helps me so much. Like, because what would be intimidating for me in your shoes is like, I have to change my whole approach to this. Like, it's huge. And to just do one thing and focus on that for a while is so much more helpful.
I love that. Yeah. And that's such a great, that's very similar to what I'm working on with myself right now, is being aware of how I feel while I'm interacting with another person, right? Like being aware of your feelings. Sitting alone in a room is like not that bad. Walking down the street, not that bad. But while I'm doing my job specifically, right, to also be able to stay that step away and observe and make sure that I'm holding to the intention that I set for the day or whatever. Yeah, I hear it.
How have you been doing it?
It's so hard.
Yeah.
It is so hard, especially to pay attention to the emotional state, which at least for myself, my emotional state and what I'm actually doing are not always like, they don't make sense, right? Like I am having emotional responses, I guess, to stimulus without even really realizing it. And like, I'll be excited at times when I don't need to be, or angry at times when I don't need to be. And you don't even, for me, I don't even really realize that that's happening because I'm not paying attention. I'm paying such close attention to another person that I'm like neglecting what's going on inside. Is like to try and observe that is, oh my gosh, it's hard, but it's like, it's fun, it's worth it. You know? But like, that's it. You pick here's what I want to work on today, or here's what I want to work on for this hour, and you do it. You like do the work, even if it's hard.
The it's so true that it's one thing to be mindful when you're by yourself, to not get pissed off when somebody cuts you off or whatever. even that's
Or
hard
shoots
for
a
me.
Nerf gun at your
Yeah, exactly. But it's I mean, it's a million times more difficult when you're interacting with another human being,
Mm-hmm.
who's full of just complexity, and there's so many more variables. And one interesting bit of advice I got, it was at the end of a meditation retreat that I went on. It was like a week-long retreat. And the teacher said, you probably reached like a peaceful place, but you're about to go into the real battlefield, which is being back with other people. You've chosen not to be monks. Monks don't have to deal with people.
Mm-hmm.
They're just chilling in their caves silently, but you've chosen to be lay people. So you're going back into the world. She gave one specific piece of advice on like how to stay mindful in interpersonal interactions, which is like, if you're having a conversation that is going to be difficult for you. Let's say you have to call your mom if you have a difficult mom. Make yourself a cup of tea or coffee and just hold it in your hands and feel the warmth in your hands.
Mm-hmm.
And just anytime you feel yourself like starting to get angry or losing it or whatever, come back to that warm cup in your hand. So that's another kind of object trick.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny actually. I have this like sort of like squeeze ball. It's like a rubber egg that helps you with grip strength.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess like I didn't really plan it, but I happen to have it in my pocket. And in the beginning of the conversation, I was like, I'm going to take this squeeze ball out and just have it in my hand because I'm going to try to talk a little bit less on this podcast. And maybe this can help, just having this object can help remind me, to stay in my body and not just get lost in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to go look at the transcript to see how many minutes I fucking talked on this one. But anyway, so Nick,
I use a similar thing with my students as well, because people are with me for 1 hour, right? And I need them to focus on what we're focusing on for an hour, not work, relationships, chores, like all this stuff, which is like impossible to do. My gym is in Manhattan. Like these are Midtown Manhattan. Like these are people that have a lot of pressure on them day to day. Barbells have a smooth part and a rough part. And so you can see it in someone's eyes when they are drifting and like not there. You can see it in the way that they're moving. And so I tell my students all the time, feel the smooth, feel the rough. Like when your head starts going towards whatever, just feel the smooth, feel the rough. It's the barbell. This is what you're doing. Give me 1 second, and then you can go back to thinking about emails or whatever. I like the tactile stuff. I think it makes sense.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So usually when we wrap things up, we ask our guests if they have a piece of advice that they've been given or they've gleaned over the years that still resonates with them.
Mm-hmm.
Wondering if you have any for us.
I do. So one is from a very close friend, and it sounds very macho, but he said to me one day, he just looked me dead in the eye, he said, "Nick, don't be a wimp." And, in the immediate moment, what he was talking about is like, try harder to, make this lift. But I've found that to be such a great piece of advice for a lot of my life. Like when I'm scared to do something, don't choose to let the fear decide. Like decide to do what you want to do. And then every time, whether it's a hard conversation with a partner or, for me, it's mostly like conflict, bad conversations with people where I kind of want to chicken out. Just remind myself, don't be a wimp. And then I also get to think of every time that I chose not to be a wimp, not to let fear decide for me. And it's like, I don't know, it's like very invigorating for me. So I don't know if that one only works because I have the history to draw from, but like, don't be a wimp. Like you can do it. If I can give one other one, just because I feel like it kind of applies to what we've been talking about a little bit here. I think it was Thomas Jefferson. He used gendered pronouns, but I'll say one will never complain of a lack of time who wastes none. Like don't waste. It's all we only have like so much. If you use all the time, like it's actually, you can do it.
All right, everyone, that's it for our show this week. If you have a question, you can send it to us at heymanpod@gmail.com, or better yet, give us a call. Leave a voicemail at 917-426-4326. You can find us on Instagram or Twitter at heymanpod. And if you have a second, leave us a review, please. Apple Podcasts or wherever else you get your podcasts. We love them. Thanks.